You're on the record, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. So if folks want to come up and prepare whatever presentations they have, or if we have folks presenting, come up.
Just as a side note for the members, we are currently assessing all of the governor's vetoes, trying to figure out what the impact on Anchorage is. As far as we can tell so far, he has cut all of the homeless services money so the HSCMG funding is gone, all the homeless service money in the AHFC budget is gone. He deleted the municipal revenue sharing capitalization, so that will affect not this year's revenue sharing, but next year's revenue sharing and continued revenue sharing because of the way we disperse the funding that's in there currently.
So we didn't cut this year's revenue sharing, but that's
No.
$30 million cut.
Because of the way their formula works now, when they reconfigured the revenue sharing program, there's $90 million in the pot right now, and what they do is split off a third of it every year and put that into the disbursement fund.
Gotcha.
So this year has the money in it. What he did is he cut the $30 million that would replenish the fund. So it takes the fund down to $60 million, which means next year we get a $20 million disbursement for the entire state, and then after that it goes again, it gets cut again, unless they replenish the fund next year. So it goes into the fight for all of the other capital funding when they go back to the system next year.
They cut Medicaid because...
Yep, they left a bunch of federal money on the table. We're pulling that together. We're currently in conversations with the Coalition to End Homelessness and the Homelessness Leadership Council to make sure that all of those organizations are A, getting press, and B, we're all on the same page talking about how devastating it will be to this community in particular.
Yeah, can you make sure that the co-chairs of the committee get kind of looped into whatever the
Absolutely.
talking points are?
Yep.
Thank you.
And once you...
I'm sorry, when the press release comes out on that, could it reference the legislature's recent letter or homelessness to Anchorage?
I'm trying to think of there's other, cuts involved, but what we can see just from looking at it initially is that he essentially cut it all the way back to his original February proposal. 50% school bond debt reimbursement out. So we are looking at a 210 average homeowner increase for next year.
So
A couple of other things.
does that mean we have to do short-term borrowing this year?
No.
What I heard about the press conference, I was like,
We shouldn't have to. Because we can make it up next year.
that's all I can do.
When can the veto, how long do they have to do the override?
I don't know the exact timeline. I can figure that out. As of right now, based on all information that we are getting from Juneau, not the Valley, is that they don't have the count. So
Can we schedule a work session for next week on this, on the budget?
I think they have 30 days.
to override.
I think so.
Okay. So we'll keep you updated because you guys are here all day for most of this stuff. So I'll just come down and.
I mean, obviously we should get more information in the next couple days, but at the very least by next Friday, if we can have a presentation on.
It's probably not going to be Friday because remember it's July 4th, so most MOA staff are going to be gone Thursday, Friday. So we can probably do something maybe before your committee. Your committee is next week, right?
No, nothing's next week.
I will
And I think we
forward you
cancel
all
it. Oh,
the
great.
slate that we have from one of our lobbyists that sort of outlines the cuts, the full-time jobs.
And whatever, like,
coming out.
talking points, same deals, because then we can
Yep.
be sharing that and telling people.
Yeah. But essentially, we think that, at least at first glance, that means, and potentially, mostly Brother Francis, but also potentially means have to shut down.
Oh, good.
What's the shutdown?
Beans and Brother Francis. I wonder how I'm looking on the veto override.
Somebody,
I know it wasn't looking good before, but I wonder if anyone will. I kind of feel like come around now that it's realized. Still like sort of session. And now we're.
Kansas City,
They said it because they took council prepared ready to go to June.
Yeah.
and so
Yeah, that's where I think they're all going to show up.
came to my mind as
What a waste of time and
volunteering your neighborhood.
resources to sue
And then he raised his voice and started getting off on the rant. I'm going, wait a minute. Everybody's neighborhood is going to say the
Talk
same
about a
thing.
waste of money.
So where
And
do
having
we
cared
put it?
about money.
Who was it?
I don't remember. They mentioned it.
Oh.
But
Oh dear.
put it somewhere
Yeah,
else.
let's keep going.
Solution, but not
Yeah, it's
financing.
been a great commitment. That was great.
You're talking about something
Make sure that
we're still
next
there.
time we have other topics, we'll schedule meetings about those other topics.
Although it's just kind of been
It is.
it's
It's
just
just
gonna
gonna
keep
keep
rolling. Yeah, and I feel like it's good to keep talking through it.
Yeah. All right, we're gonna go ahead and get started on this work session on AIM 74-2019. It's the transmittal of the Watershed Natural Resources Advisory Commission resolution regarding the use of herbicides to control MayDay trees in parks and greenbelts. Let's go ahead and do introductions. Starting with John.
John Weddleton.
Pete Peterson.
Forrest Dunbar.
Meg Zolotov.
Christopher Constant.
Austin Davidson. Susanna Burns.
Felix Rivera.
Crystal Kennedy. Lydia Listen, legal intern. Dean is not here right now. He'll be here in a second.
All right. And then do we have members of the Watershed Commission here? Great. If you could introduce yourself, sir.
I'm Rick Sennett with the Anchorage Watershed Natural Resources Advisory Commission.
Thank you. And then do we have other folks here to present, if they could introduce themselves too?
Hans Thompson. Gino Brasiano, UAF Cooperative Services.
Chris, we're not here to present, but we're here to answer questions. Chris Reed.
Great. Yes, sir.
Jim Record, State Division Enforcement.
Okay.
Well,
All right, great. Okay, so it looks like that's everyone that's here to speak. So I guess we'll go ahead and start with walking us through the resolution and some of the recommendations. Mr. Sennett, if you could feel free to join us at the table, and then whoever else wants to join him.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, we have the resolution. Our resolution came about because we were approached by Mr. Thompson, a private citizen, about the use of glyphosate and other herbicides on MayDay trees, which is an invasive species, in city parks within 150 feet of fish-bearing streams. And as you speak up. Yes, and as we understood it, as he had gone to the Parks Department and asked for a waiver as allowed by the ordinance, and did get satisfaction there, and so he came to us and asked us to look at this, look at the herbicides objectively, and come up with a recommendation, and we did. In our resolution, we found that glyphosate and 3 of the other 4 herbicides, based on all the evidence we could find in a fairly exhaustive review, appeared to be safe for both fish and people and other animals, and that MayDay trees were such a pressing environmental issue that the low risk of using these herbicides in parks near fish-bearing streams overweighed the problem with MayDay trees.
Could you clarify what exactly you needed a waiver for? I don't know if you want to speak to it.
It is at the Parks Director's discretion whether to allow herbicide use within 150 feet of a creek.
Okay. And this way you went to the commission to get a waiver from that particular exemption?
Incorrect. I went to the commission to make a scientific decision regarding this. The Parks Director is not necessarily qualified to make decisions regarding science and the efficacy of using herbicides. And so I felt it was within the Watersheds Commission to really make a decision on those 2 things.
Okay.
All right. We would purely make a recommendation. Obviously, we're not a decision-making body. We recommended both to Director Rada and to the Assembly and the Mayor that these herbicides be considered. They seem to us to be safe enough. And the way the ordinance is written is that certain herbicides, natural herbicides, organic herbicides on a list published by the USDA are allowed within, as I understand it, within 150 feet of salmon fish-bearing streams, but that all other herbicides are not. Unfortunately, most herbicides aren't particularly effective at controlling MayDay trees, but some synthetic herbicides are, and these were the least toxic, least carcinogenic ones that were mentioned.
Yeah, Ms. Zeltel.
Thank you. We've had a concern raised in some community councils in Midtown about application of herbicides in the areas that would need to be, where the application need to be with regard to homeless camps existing and people living right near or at where the application would be. Can someone talk to me a little bit about that in terms of, because we have 150, 100 whatever for salmon, like what about people?
Well, I can address it. A better person would be Gino Graciano, who is with the Cooperative Extension Service and knows the methodology much better about how they're going to do it. In summary, as I understand it, they're not going to be spraying this from planes or things like that. They're going to be taking a very targeted approach. In many cases, they're going to be scoring the bark of the tree and injecting, by some means, the herbicide into the bark. So there's almost no way that you can even touch this, much less if you touched it, it's such a low toxicity. Glyphosate, the acute toxicity of glyphosate is less than that of caffeine, aspirin, vinegar, salt, many of the things. So it's not an acutely toxic. It is toxic, all pesticides are to some extent, but it's not an acutely toxic thing. And it doesn't seem to have chronic toxicity that you would associate with some herbicides. And the big problem, as I understand it, the big concern has been with this carcinogenic potential. And even that, with glyphosate and these other 3 herbicides that we've looked at and recommended that the city use, are extremely low, and the EPA finds them probably not carcinogenic. But Gino could address, if you want to talk about more of the homeless, specifically the homeless person touching the glyphosate issue.
So if I recall correctly from the labels and the pesticides that would be used,
Oh, sorry. We record it, so it's really important to kind of speak really clearly.
Gino Graciano, UAF Cooperative Extension Service, with the specific herbicides that they would be using, in addition to those being those direct treatments that Rickson had just described. If you were to apply these, the way re-entry into that area would be once they're dried, and that's going to be relatively quickly. And the city also has a requirement to post both before and after these applications that's much beyond that period when they would dry, alerting the public that these applications are going to happen in these areas of the public parks.
I actually have 2 quick follow-up questions. One, there's been discussion of foliar spraying, and so that has raised some concerns as far as additional human exposure. And then if I understand the ordinance correctly in terms of notice, it's within residential and commercial building is how we define where we're going to put our notice. So if there's some other practice, that would be good to know that would address the issue.
Yeah, no, these, I participated in some of the notices that have gone out there, and they're posted both at the beginning and ending and within, basically along the trails where people would enter. And it's either 3 days or a week ahead of time. I can't remember the exact number, but that's what's been going on.
And then would there be any additional concerns with foliar spraying based on what we've just discussed?
Well, you all didn't recommend, what was your...
We recommended that whatever techniques these guys had proposed, and foliar spray for shrubs was one of them, because with a shrub with a very small diameter stem, it would take you days and days and days to store and do it. So, as I understand it, they would use some sort of a hand sprayer. They wouldn't just be blasting something from a truck. Hand spray enough of the leaves on the shrubs to kill it. So very localized.
Ideally, that would be done, with smaller trees, shrubs, things that they're not going to be taller than a person's head, and still the chemical's going to dry fairly quickly and be absorbed in there. So, unless the person would be within an hour or 2 year exposure period, likely.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Also. And so, just for members of the public and members of the body, so the ordinance that's being referred to is AO number 2017-59 as amended, if you don't have a copy of it. Mr. Peterson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And, these trees are hard to kill. And so even if you injected the bark, does that kill the roots? Because I've heard that those, even when they pull them out by the roots, sometimes they come back if they don't get every single single root. And so is this a proven method that's worked in other jurisdictions?
That's my understanding, that this technique of putting the pesticide and the herbicide directly into the bark and into the roots does kill them. Pulling them out without using herbicide simply stimulates their growth in many cases. So, and even cutting them down, so they'll put out suckers along the root system. And
Right.
It's like a many-headed hydra. You just increase it. You cut off one head and you've got 10 more. So the herbicide is what's used to counteract that problem.
Okay, great, thank you.
Felix Rivera, mother of hydrants. Mr. Constant, Mr. Weddleton.
Thanks. I had a very interesting outreach from a constituent today who wanted me to communicate that in Hope, Alaska, the MayDay trees have been nearly eliminated. They were taking over and they've been eliminated using this methodology of using this herbicide. And now they're just now nipping down the last seedlings. Nothing's gotten to root. And so I had someone else, another constituent, pose a question to me yesterday on this topic. And the question was, what is the Assembly's role in this? We accepted and have reviewed this report, but what's our job here? Other than to ensure that we're not allowing our constituents to be harmed, but specifically.
Yeah, so after we're done with the questions in the queue, I'd like the commission to go through the 4 recommendations that they had. And I believe one of them has a specific tie-in to the Assembly, which is why we have this ordinance here. I'm not sure about the other ones, and I guess we'll explore that here if they're asking the Assembly for specific action. Mr. Wells.
Well, maybe I should have reread it. I'm relying on my 2-year-old memory of this, but my understanding is we have a certain list of things that you can use pretty much without getting extra permission, but then you could go, John Rodick could go to the Department of Health and say, hey, we want to use this other stuff because we need to, and that presumably could pass. So my sense going in is this is great information, but we don't really need to take an action because they already have the tools. That's a yes or no question.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That's essentially our understanding as well. The Assembly's role in an AIM is simply to accept. There is not a role in typically follow-up action. And especially with the understanding that we have the existing ordinances, as Mr. Weddleton just summarized, we believe the tools exist currently for the administration to act on the recommendations of the Watershed Natural Resources Commission.
Thank you. Yeah, Mr. Wells.
So what's your position on this? I mean, we need to, what are you going to do?
The many-headed hydra needs to be addressed, absolutely. So I'll let Director Rada speak to some of the practical concerns, but I think as clearly articulated in the previous ordinance, notice, awareness, et cetera, is a number 1 priority for us in addressing this concern. And I'll let John add to that.
So one of the challenges that we face, and as surfaced here a little bit, is there's, and it's actually in the conclusion of the report, it speaks to many community councils, but not many community councils were part of the review by the commission. And so it puts us in kind of a contradictory position when we answer to the public. So I think I have spoken to the Assembly, regardless of whatever the outcome is, I would prefer 2 things occur. If we're going, if you accept it, that's perfectly fine. And we'll address the mechanics. But from the standpoint of the municipality as a whole, and all community councils being engaged in the dialogue or the outcomes, which we went through when the ordinance was passed, there was an extensive public hearing, public process, lots of outreach, exposure, education, etc. That hasn't necessarily been part of the commission's findings. My preference is those findings get distributed so everybody gets to see that if we're going to adjust policy slightly, the way it's kind of being directed in this, that all community councils have that voice at the table again. And if you're going to incorporate significant changes, and it's not a one-off, Rogers Park votes yes, South Addition votes no, North Star says yes, Rapid says whatever, it puts us in a kind of an awkward position from being consistent with public policy. my preference is that the community councils get re-engaged, put this back out on the table. Your findings that are very open and public is very defensible then by us, that we're going to apply a standard of practice to all in a similar fashion, not just based on one or two voices, one or two votes. That makes it a struggle. One of the other pieces is that I would respectfully ask that our effective commission understand the ramifications of whatever changes we make. And that is, it should go back to the Parks and Rec Commission, because I know that there are people on that commission that also will have a voice on whatever the policies and procedures and final policies are.
Any follow-up, Mr. Whittleton?
I think so. So, I mean, that's if we were to consider a policy change. But if we just thank them for this really very educational and amazing amount of work, I can't believe the commission did this. So thank you. But we don't have to do anything. We do want to get recommendations, but you have a process. Maybe you go to the Parks and Rec Commission and you do it. So we could just thank you, and then you go and kill MayDay.
My intent is that after this process, that I will take this and distribute it to the Parks and Rec Commission. They need to know as well.
And then we don't have to have any further involvement if we're going to do that. Okay.
I do have a question about Wade. Mr. Constant.
Thank you, John. Mr. Rada, I would hope that, separate from the conversation of the specific methodologies, that your team, if we need to find some funding to help make a plan, it probably isn't too difficult, but make a 6-year plan for the eradication of the May tree in our park spaces. And in that plan, put forward your reasoned strategy on how we can accomplish this. And then let's set to the task of doing it in a strategic way. And because I appreciate the effort, the drive to do this, and we're started, so why don't we do it in a comprehensive way?
Thank you, Mr. Constant. Did you want to respond to
Just
that?
thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator Constant, that's exactly sort of the process that we're describing. The recommendation from the Watershed Natural Resources Commission as an advisory commission is designed to provide that sort of evidence-based or scientific basis for making policy decisions or law changes, et cetera. So the first phase was the recommendation from Watershed Natural Resources. The next step is operationally is for us to go forward to Parks and Rec Commission and we're going to drag Mr. Sinnott and Mr. Thompson with us and lay out that operational plan for achieving those goals with that commission.
And I would offer that doesn't necessitate the ceasing of current efforts, right? Let's keep working where we can, but at the same time, put it into a context. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Constant. Ms. Salatel.
Thank you. I just want a clarification. So if you take it through the Parks and Rec Commission, they could then suggest policy change, and then that would work its way through. Is that right? Am I understanding that correctly? Okay. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Salatel. So I put myself in the queue really quick. So does the Parks and Rec suggest a change to this ordinance 2017-59? Or are you guys happy with this ordinance as written?
Well, we worked kind of long and hard to get that thing finally approved, and there was a lot of modifications. If you go back and look at the amended version as opposed to what originally was presented, there was a lot of dialogue, a lot of public input. So I think the conclusion was a good finding, and we were involved in that process.
All right. On that same question.
The finding that they make a recommendation that we require approval of adjacent community councils, I would say I would not support that, and that it would be the input of all community councils, but certainly not the approval. I don't think in any place do we grant the community councils veto authority over our policies.
Could I get
Sure.
maybe just consequence of the point. We have outreach with community councils in multiple facets. It's not so much that they approve, but we want the input from them.
Right. I agree.
That's important.
Just the language here is.
And if we plan a park project, it's not ultimately their approval, but it's the input in how we make the decisions.
Yeah, this resolution just states approval of all adjacent community councils. I agree with your process and how you do it. I just want to ensure that everybody knows that word isn't really functional. It would be, public process through or consultation with.
Could you do me a favor and point out where that?
Yeah, it's in the resolution. It's on page 3 of the packet. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. Right, okay. Then that's it. Just eliminate the idea from our practice that councils have a veto authority. Thank you. Thank you.
So it's okay as it is.
Yeah, it is. So then it is
Okay.
taken there. I'm sorry, I just saw it.
But is it still a misinterpretation? Because right now, we don't need approval, do we?
No. Technically, no. We try to listen to community councils, and oftentimes they vote for their approval or not approval.
I just want to be really clear to everybody.
Yeah, which is it's kind of funny. People, and we're all been involved in community councils, but Chris, you've led a community council. John, you led a community council. I think I was a vice president, and like the people who have like the most experience with community councils are the most hesitant to like give them that kind of power. We can't do that.
Thank you, Mr. Constant. Thank you, Mr. Dunbar. So, sticking back to the queue, I have Mr. Peterson, Mr. Thompson, then Mr. Sinner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And so if we're successful with a 6-year plan of eliminating these trees in our parks and greenbelts, what are we going to do about the trees on private property? Because in the fall, they have so darn many little berries on there that the birds coming, they'll still just be starting all over in a few years. What's the plan to get private people to do this as well?
Sure.
Thank you, through the chair. Private property is a different story, and for that, I'd recommend you call John Weddleton. He's got a lot of experience in killing areas. But in all seriousness, Senator Peterson, the next stop, I think, on this plan to rid Anchorage of invasive species is to actually work with utilities. There are a number of utility easements across the city, my neighborhood being one, where in that utility easement, choke cherries have taken root. And the utilities' approach to clearing their utility easements in the past is simply just clear cut, which is great, except for, as we learned from Mr. Sinnott, we're just making it more hardy. So choke cherries in utility easements and other areas that are not parks areas but are public land areas should be addressed now.
Okay, thank you. Can I ask a question?
Related to that subject?
Yeah, and I don't know if Mr. Snod or Jim or someone else knows. So Chris said that Hope had effectively eliminated or was on the way to eliminating choke cherries. How did they deal with the public property issue?
I worked a little bit with those folks in advisory capacities. Anyway, most of that was on private property, and the surrounding properties that were public are Forest Service, and the Forest Service was on board with dealing with that within, I think it's the Porcupine Campground, it's at the end of the road, they had some there. And then I believe, the names are escaping me, but they have somewhat of a city assembly or community assembly that they were going to as far as deal with stuff at the library and things like that.
No, but the private property then, it was all voluntary?
Oh, yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Yeah, I'll add you on to the queue, Mr. Thompson. So Mr. Thompson, then Mr. Sim.
To respond to Mr. Peterson's question about what to do about private property, I think that it's not even necessary, at least within the scope of trying to solve it within the parks, to consider private property. This is a problem on our parks that has been decades in the making. What we have with invasive species is a solvable problem, and that's why I, as a private citizen, think that it's something that I can take up. It's something that I think that with effort of one person pushing things forward with many different avenues and everywhere we can go, it's solvable. But herbicide treatment is a key component of solving this problem. If we were to remove all the bird cherry today, we would have birds depositing seeds, and we would have seedlings, and they would grow. But over the course of 2 years, it wouldn't look anything like it is today. What the main source of the repeating and kind of growth of this is the cycle of large trees existing in our parks right now, depositing seeds that just fall on the ground and making many hundreds of seedlings. The one kind of core weakness in the bird cherry strategy of reproduction, though, is the seeds have a viability of 1 to 3 years. So if we were to have the large adult bird cherry trees treated, we would remove that problem in the first year of these large trees making hundreds of seeds. We would have the problem of the next couple of years of removing these seedlings, and which is much less work, and you can have volunteers do it, you can have little children do it, and it works. And then we will be kind of back to zero, and that's where I would like to see us. And I don't know about a 6-year plan, I don't know about that. Going to the Parks and Recs Commission, going to the community councils, the science is established. We can talk about and we can quantify the exposure of folks to glyphosate through foliar spray or cutting to the base of a tree. But really, that's one aspect of the toxicity problem. One is that it will take one treatment. We will not be going back year after year unless we're unsuccessful in treating it and we don't have a unified plan that's set about by an expert. And then also, this is a federal program that's paying for the expert to come in. There's no public money in this. The EPA manages the program that the DEC executes for certification for this. There is a strong, hard test that needs to be passed for people to do this work, which requires I don't know, we aren't all experts in this, but it's a very stringent and well executed plan to make sure that public exposure is kept at a minimum. And we can look and we can point out where the concerns are, but at the end of the day, the concerns that we see are only part of the picture of the true exposure and the true risk that people see, which is minimal, incredibly small, and doesn't touch the public unless they're actively trying to be exposed. And I guess that's all I'll say about that. Thank you.
Thank you. So Mr. Sinnott, then I have Mr. Constant, Mr. Webbs.
To reinforce Mr. Constant's point about community councils, it was our understanding that, at least informally, the Parks Department was allowing community councils to have veto power in their adjacent areas. That was our understanding, and the community council would vote yes, and then they'd vote no. So anyway, I see two flaws with that. Whether it's done or not, it shouldn't be done. I'm a very active and strong supporter of community councils. My own community council is a good one. But the problem with the community council on something like this is you can have 6 or 10 people at a meeting one time and they say something, and then the next month it's totally different. So you can get approval, unapproval, depending on who's talking. That's one problem. The other problem is, right now, most of the infestations of MayDay trees are along the creeks and green belts. But those green belts are used by all people, not just the people there. So yes, I understand there's a concern about toxicity, there's a concern about carcinogenic effects, but that concern affects the entire city. So the entire city should be the ones that are inputting and having input on this issue, and not just the individual community councils on a month-by-month basis.
Thank you. Mr. Constant.
Thanks. I think, Hans, that you spoke at once not in support of, but also then in support of a plan. Doing it with a plan is wise. My question is, what's our plan if we get to a broad effort to do this for removing the dead trees? Because just killing them will then create a massive fire hazard in the downtown, which we're clearly already contemplating.
Sure. So the risk of fire exists right now, and the risk grows if you leave the dead trees there. We do have a forestry team that was hired last year and are tasked with removing those trees. Last fall, which kind of kicked off the public response to the herbicide, was at Valley Moon Park, where we still have many dead trees in that park. I've heard from the Parks Department that it would be cleared, but it has not. And that is a great test example of showing where and what the improvement would look like if we were to remove the trees. But the fact is that there is a crew for the Parks Department that can do that work.
It's expensive, I clearly understand that, and so that would also be part of the 6-year plan.
Yeah, sure. Just real quick in response. Yes, both of those are absolutely valid points. The segment of Valley of the Moon Park, much like Chester Creek, the removal of the chokecherry and then the dead or down trees is a process over the course of the whole summer. So actually that particular section will happen soon. It's later this summer. Hans and several others in this room, I think, we took the first phase, which was east of the highway earlier in June, I think it was. We did this. And so it gets broken up into chunks. There's both volunteer and paid staff efforts to get into the green belts to remove limb, et cetera, bring those out to the trail, and then our contractor, our wood chipping contractor, then at a later date comes through and takes care of those. And so, but it gets broken up into segments. It's manageable that way, and so we'll continue to do that. And that is a budgetary item, but in everything that is being discussed today, and John will hate me for saying this, I don't see it as something we can't do right now within our existing budget. As we plan ahead for a more comprehensive citywide effort, though, I want to echo what Mr. Sinnott said. We got to start with the green belts and the creeks, absolutely. But as we move on to a citywide effort to get into some of the perhaps less high visibility areas, like some of the parks in South Anchorage, that will perhaps require some additional resources. But that's part of the effort of putting together a plan to brief the PRC, the Parks and Rec Commission, on our efforts.
Thank you. Mr. Whittleton, then Mr. Dunbar.
Since he's not here, I have to channel Assemblyman Dyson for Hans and Rick, and he would say it's naive to think people make decisions based on science and facts. So we include community councils and the broader public at our peril, but we do it anyway.
Totally understand.
Thank you, Mr. Whittleton. Mr. Dunbar.
Yeah, a comment and then a question. The comment is Town Square Park, right?
Right.
Very large, very prominent, strangely beloved chokecherry trees there, and I had a chance with Jim or someone took me around and pointed them all out, and I'd love to see us come up with a short-term plan relatively soon to figure out how to swap those out, because I don't know, there's a symbolic value to having such a high-profile park be dominated in a lot of ways by chokecherry trees. Then the question is, once these trees have been treated, before or after, we assume it has to be after because we don't want people just cutting them down because it's problematic. Do they have any commercial or practical value that is, can it be used for firewood, for example? If we said, if you come and haul out these trees after we kill them, you can keep them for firewood, can they be burned? I've never...
Gino Graziano with UAF. So with some of the methods of treatment, cut stump in particular, firewood would be great because you cut the tree down, you treat just the stump, and then you haul the tree out. You still have to deal with the branches and stuff like that. The other methods, it would need to have further study done as far as the herbicides present in those trees, and whether or not that's safe to burn in a wood stove or a fireplace or a campfire. I personally wouldn't recommend doing that. That said, circling back to the fire issue and with those dead standing trees there, I would suggest getting, I think there's a municipal forester that deals with fire safety involved in that discussion, because fire and dead trees is a little more complex than what we're thinking. There's my experience with it is with spruce beetle kill. There is a short period of time when there's still needles on the tree after that spruce beetle attack that it is more prone to fire than when it's alive. But after that period of time, it's no more prone to when it's alive. Once that tree starts to rot, then it's not really a hazard at all as far as burning goes. I think your bigger hazard might be with exorbitantly large trees that might fall on someone at some point, rather than fire.
So can I just have a quick follow-up?
Yeah.
So has there been any contemplation of are there any private entities that want these trees after we've killed them? Is there anyone that can make use of them?
Mr. Chair, we haven't heard that expressed before, but I don't think we've ever asked the question before.
Well, I mean, it's just we're going to have, we just talked about it, like it's an additional expense and perhaps a significant expense to remove them after we've killed them. And if there's any partner we can bring in to help us with that, I think we should.
Thank you, Mr. Yeah, go ahead.
One thing I know is not maybe people that use it, but there is a group called Team Rubicon, which is a group of ex-military, and they need chainsaw training. So it could act as potentially grounds for chainsaw training. I'm just throwing that out.
Thank you. Ms. Solito.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In the interest of partnerships and neighborhood investment, there are some of these trees in right-of-ways, especially where the neighborhoods are maintaining. So if there would be any way, as part of the plan, to help the neighborhoods identify these trees officially, so that they, as they take care of their right-of-ways and they work on their plans, I'm thinking of Rogers Park, my own neighborhood, they could be pulled out, replaced, whatever makes sense, because I know they have a significant personal investment, and it may defray the costs or have that opportunity.
Thank you, Ms. Solito. All right. Mr. Sinnott or Mr. Thompson, did you guys have any final thoughts?
I think that ultimately, I'm glad that I had your time to talk about this issue. I think that there may be some policy changes that are necessary, but ultimately it's a decision that has to happen at the administrative level. They have the capacity and the purview to make the decision to say, yes, let's move forward with herbicide use. Yes, because the scientific body that we've established to make decisions on this has made a decision on this, and that the community, at least within the community councils where there's been unanimous approval, South Addition, North Star, and Fairview, west on Chester Creek, basically to New Stewart Highway, we need to allow this herbicide use. We need to show the improvements that can happen, and if we show those improvements, everyone's going to want that.
Thank you.
I don't have anything more to add, except that I did prepare some bullet points. There was a 30-plus page document that we wrote, and it's kind of hard to wade through, so I boiled down to 3 pages of bullet points, which I thought was doing pretty good. And then, if you want to pass those to the assembly members, that'd be great.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. LaFrance.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So just so I'm clear in the community council piece, it is not the official policy. Okay. So does there need to be any clarifying language in the document we received? And we're not necessarily receiving or accepting this memo from the commission so much as the AIM.
Through the chair, that's correct. The actual resolution that was issued by the Watershed Natural Resources Commission is what the body will be accepting.
Oh, we will be accepting.
Accepting,
not adopted.
yeah.
Right. But I mean, so we're accepting, for example, then item D that says Parks and Rec Department reconsider its policy, but we know that's actually not the case because there isn't a policy of that.
Through the chair, that is correct, but because it was drafted this way from the advisory commission, and it's not an adoption document, the assembly doesn't amend or change or edit non-adoption documents. Personally, I don't see any harm with it staying in there. We've communicated to you all that that's not necessarily the current practice. But the big takeaway today is that they have provided they've fulfilled their role, which is as an advisory commission, taking into consideration items that fall under your specific scientific jurisdiction and giving a recommendation. So we have what we need.
Okay, understood, thanks. And the other question I had is this a practice, the application of these herbicides to this invasive species that other communities have been using as well? I don't know if the MayDay problem is widespread outside of Alaska.
Juno might be able to speak to other communities, but I do know that the National Park Service, the Nature Conservancy, and a variety of other agencies like that do recommend and use glyphosate and these other herbicides to control these other properties. So if the National Park Service does it, probably reasonably safe.
Thank you, Mr. Peters.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And so is there a private company that will come out and inject people's trees to kill them?
Yeah, there are several tree care companies in town, and I get at least 2 to 3 phone calls a week from homeowners asking how do I get these things removed, and I tell them call a tree care company, and they should either be grinding the stump and getting it out after they cut it down, or they should be applying, a custom treatment and then coming back to grind the stump later if you don't want the stump there. So, yeah, they're around. They do it.
And any idea what it might cost?
No.
Depends on the size of the tree.
About $600 to do. It was a big tree though. This thing was taller than my house, over 30 feet. 30 feet. And then there were 2 smaller ones, and they'd already blown down, so I cut off a bunch of branches. So it was expensive. And now I have his lawn, little guys.
Thank you, Mr. Peterson. Thank you, Mr. Weddleton. Ms. Quinn Davidson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to say to Suzanne, there's a memo in here that I was reading while I'm sitting here, and it says, it highlights other communities. This is going on, so I'll keep that and many others. But then interestingly says that this is not an invasive species in the lower 48, so for whatever reason it must love our climate. And then I want to mention that my understanding, my wife is on your commission, so we were talking a bit about it, and my understanding is MayDay trees are not allowed in Anchorage, but you can purchase them in the valley or in other locations, and so a statewide ban on those would make a lot of sense, and we actually brought that up with a friend of ours who's a state legislator recently. So maybe it will happen, who knows. And then I just wanted to say thanks to your commission and highlight that Mr. Weddleton, when you worked on the bear resistant container ordinance, that he said that that was the best report and work from a commission he'd ever seen, and that everyone should live up to that standard. And Stephanie informed me that that really is you, Rick. So thank you for your work.
On bears maybe, but we all work on the legislation.
So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Davidson. Mr. Constant.
Yeah, just a note towards effectiveness of the change in the policy we have. Some of you were made aware that there was a local business who advertised MayDay trees on the radio about 10 days ago, 2 weeks ago. And I was receiving tons of calls, and code enforcement received a ton of calls. I personally went out to look. There were no May trees. Code enforcement inquired. There were no May trees. It was just a very creative ad company that decided the word May tree would rhyme. And so the hounds came barking at that greenhouse. And so this policy shift is working.
Thank you, Mr. Constant. All right, any final comments on this? Okay. I just want to say thank you so much for all of your hard work on this, and look forward to bringing this back up on July 9th. Thank you. So I did want to open up the question since we have a few minutes here. So we have done 2 resolutions where we have postponed them and then done a work session or put them to committee. And I just want to get an affirmation from the body if that's what we want to continue doing when it's a resolution that we think is pretty meaty or has our constituents have very much interest in it. Like this particular one, our constituents are very much interested in this. Because even though there isn't any time, particularly right now with what the Assembly is doing, I think our constituents want us to explore this. So should we continue that policy of these sort of high-level resolutions, postponing them, or do we want to go another route? Because I think there's some interest in maybe figuring out another way that we could tackle these resolutions rather than postponing them for months. Mr. Weddleton, did you have thoughts on that?
I guess I have a question. So we have something related to this on the agenda for
because we postponed this. That's why we're having this work session.
Why did we postpone it again? I forgot. Maybe it's just information we got it.
Yeah, to have this work session.
Yeah, I'll add you. Yeah.
Mr. Doe.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think that, well, so there's several different types of resolutions, right? And this one, we accept it, has no actual practical policy effect, whether we accept it or don't accept it. But I do think it's fine to postpone and have these kind of discussions. I do. I just think that when we do that, we should be clear about what we're doing. That is, be clear to our constituents, for example, like had Parks and Rec gone forward and started doing this application during the interim weeks, people might have been like, what are you doing? They're violating the law. It's like, well, no, actually, we delayed it, but that didn't have any practical effect on the policy itself. So that's my only request, is that when we do this, and we do it on a case-by-case basis, that we just are clear with our constituents what we're exactly doing.
Okay. Yeah, we can work on being very clear. Yeah, Mr. Shute.
Just to add to that, Mr. Chairman, typically the AIM vehicle is purely used for communication methods, but we recognize that there's going to be some AIM communications that should go through it, that we want to have a work session on, for example. And so you'll see one here shortly, actually, from me and the library's strategic plan for the next 5 years. We deliberately are going to set a public hearing date that's in the future so that we can host a work session on it. So sometimes we set it up, other times you guys do. There's nothing wrong with that at all.
All right. Any other thoughts on that? Yeah, Mr. Prince.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think that it's really good to try to anticipate which resolutions tend to explode. Like we had in Gretchen Lemhoff and I had introduced one on the 4th Avenue Theater, which we had intended to not discuss in the meeting and have a work session on to talk about. And that was the case with another resolution, because it seems like once they hit the Tuesday agenda, they have that potential to take off, and then it seems it's much more productive to have this kind of setting to look at information or to supplement maybe what should have accompanied the original resolution. So I would say yes when we think there's something that, maybe that's everything that could be potentially explosive. It still surprises me what catches fire, I guess, as far as a discussion. But I would support work sessions for those.
Yeah, so the only, and maybe the clerk can weigh in on this one, but the only logistical thing is all of these types of resolutions are put in our consent agenda. And so the first time that we're seeing it is when it's up for adoption and there's no public hearing, no nothing. So unless we postpone it at that meeting, there's no chance to actually talk about it. So is there a mechanism other than us just postponing it at the meeting that we can do something sort of prior before it gets on the agenda?
Mr. Chair, you do see the items on the preliminary agenda, and so that is usually published about the week before the meeting. So if you wanted to, it's difficult to schedule a work session between Tuesday and the next Tuesday, but we could try. I think getting this group of people here would be difficult. If you wanted to do work sessions on Tuesdays or Mondays, we could certainly try, but otherwise, Mr. Chair, I'd have to agree with you that it would have to be postponed.
Does the chair have the authority to set a public hearing for something that's on the agenda?
If there's a preliminary agenda, it depends. The code talks about resolutions being set for public hearing,
right.
And I think you possibly could do that. Typically, items for public hearing are introduced then, but I think you could probably do that. I think Mr. Bates would have to weigh in on that.
I'm just reading something against that last part of what you said. But I think that in this instance, in many like this resolution doesn't require any assembly action. It's just the commission fulfilling the duty of informing the assembly as to what they were doing. And I think I said this at the assembly, you could just do approve the motion to accept it, and it's simply accepting that was working the information from the commission. It doesn't stop you from having a work session. You can always just accept it. And you can have a work session on this subject any time because you see the public issue, political issue, environmental issue that's running public interest. So I think that there should be any sense of urgency in terms of it's on the agenda. We have to have a work session quickly, but I can see that because it's in front of you that you want to do something soon. I think the process you did works just fine. Make sure now that ends that you have to do something before you accept this type of thing.
Right. Yeah, I just
want to sure that addressed that last time.
If you want to repeat that.
So, Dean, the question was, if the chair or one of the members sees an item on the consent agenda, on the preliminary consent agenda, could they contact the clerk's office, and before we publish the final agenda, could we indicate that there would be a public hearing on that item? Would it need to be introduced, or could we just leave it where it's at on the consent agenda?
That sounds really difficult to accomplish.
The chair would have to be awful busy between the time that preliminary agenda is issued and
Yeah, it sounds like
it's
it.
final.
Okay.
That's a very tight time frame.
Yeah, did you want to weigh in, Mr. Constantine?
Yeah, I don't know that a single member could pull and set for public hearing an item because you need 3. But I think what could happen, it seems legal, would be that if a member expresses interest in an item being pulled and set for public hearing, somehow it could be denoted on the agenda that a member has requested this be set for a public hearing, so that the other members have a sense and the public has been notified that someone has expressed interest. And in that way, you don't have to have the 3 members it takes to set a public hearing, but at the same time would provide some notice.
Through the chair, our position is that the chair orders the agenda. That's the power of the chair. So again, if a member was interested and you told the chair and the chair told us, we could do that.
All right. Oh, sure, Mr. Wilson.
Just on that, on the agenda coming up, we have a resolution to make Girdwood the first pure trash regulation zone with a public hearing on Tuesday. So we're not required to have a public hearing on the resolutions, but we want to have one because it's the first one to just say, okay, let's open the door. So no 3 people introducing it for public hearing. We're not required to do a public hearing at all. So we're just choosing to have one.
Okay. Yeah, that's a little different.
How does that meet the notice requirements, though? I thought we had to have 7 days for a public hearing. I guess if it's published Friday, that would be 7 days.
Well, we don't have to have a public hearing at all.
No, I get
So
that,
we
but
will be having one.
to
So
set a
it's-
public hearing, I thought you had to meet certain notice requirements.
Through the chair, the item will be introduced on the addendum, which is, the deadline was today at noon. The staff sets the public hearings on Monday or Tuesday, so they need 7 days public notice.
Thank you. That makes sense. All right. If there's no further comments on that, go ahead and close that work session.